She divorced me at 68 and moved her new boyfriend into our house. She told me I was too old, too set in my ways, that after 35 years of marriage, she needed someone more adventurous. Then she handed me divorce papers, started openly dating her personal trainer, and moved him into the house I'd worked 3 decades to pay off. They thought I'd shuffle away quietly, that I'd just fade into some senior living facility. But they forgot one thing. The house was never just hers, and I still had the deed. Before I begin, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to hear my story. If you're comfortable, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now, let me tell you what really happened. I was 68 years old when Margaret told me she wanted a divorce. We were sitting at the same dining room table where I used to help our daughter Sarah with her college applications, where we planned family vacations, where I balanced our retirement accounts for years. She couldn't even look me in the eye. Just stared at her manicured nails and said, "Harold, I think we've grown apart. I need to find myself." Find herself? At 65? Like I was some obstacle to her self-discovery instead of the man who'd worked double shifts at the plant to put her through nursing school, who'd taken care of her mother during her final years, who'd never missed an anniversary or birthday in 35 years. We'd been married since we were young. I gave up a promotion that would have moved us to Seattle because Margaret's career was finally taking off at the local hospital. I supported her through nursing school, through her transition to administration, through every dream she'd ever mentioned. I cooked dinner most nights after I retired because she worked late. I didn't ask for gratitude, just a little respect, a little loyalty. Instead, I got divorce papers on a Monday and silence by Tuesday. By the end of the month, she said she needed space. I found out later she didn't move into an apartment or stay with her sister. She moved him in. Derek, the personal trainer she'd introduced to me 6 months ago as someone helping me get back in shape. He was 42, the same age as our daughter Sarah. Margaret didn't even have the decency to keep it quiet. Within weeks, they were posting workout photos together, hiking pictures from state parks, wine-tasting selfies. Meanwhile, I was alone in the home I'd built from nothing, sitting on furniture I'd picked out, staring at empty chairs where family dinners used to happen. Sarah tried to stay neutral. Poor girl. She was 35, married with kids of her own, but still stuck in the middle. "I don't want to take sides, Dad," she told me over coffee. I told her, "You don't have to. I already know where everyone stands." Then one morning, I got a text message. Not from Margaret, from Derek. It was casual, almost friendly. "Hey Harold, Margaret asked me to reach out. We're settling in, and it would be great if you could grab the rest of your stuff soon. Weekends work best for us. Thanks, man. Derek." Derek. This muscle-bound kid who bench-pressed in my garage was now texting me about collecting my belongings from my own house. He was living in my bedroom, eating at my table, probably using my coffee maker every morning. I sat in my recliner and stared at that text for a long time. My arthritis was acting up, but my hands weren't shaking from pain. They were shaking from rage. That house was mine. We bought it together in 1988, but I was the one who found it, negotiated the price, put down the down payment from my overtime wages at the factory. My name was still on the mortgage. Margaret never refinanced. She said it was too complicated, too much paperwork. Well, that paperwork was about to become a problem. I picked up the phone and called my old friend Bill. He'd been a lawyer for nearly 30 years and had handled our wills. When I explained the situation, he got quiet. Then he said, "Do you still have your name on the deed?" "Yes," I said. "She never changed it. And she never bought you out of your half?" "No." "Harold," he said slowly, "you still legally own half that house." I blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means you don't have to ask for anything. You can file what's called a partition action. You can force a sale, or you can make them pay you out." I didn't say anything at first. Then I asked, will they have to leave if they can't afford to buy me out? Bill said, yes, they will. I stared out the window at the garden I'd planted last spring. The tomatoes were coming in nice, like nothing had changed. I said, do it. Margaret called me 2 days later, all huffed up and indignant. Harold, did you really hire a lawyer? Yes. Why? What's the point of making this harder than it has to be? You already made it hard, I said. I'm just returning the favor. She tried to guilt me like she always did when she wanted her way. Told me I was being bitter, that I needed to accept that our marriage was over, that Derek felt uncomfortable with me lurking around. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, then maybe he shouldn't be living in a house that still has my name on the title. She hung up, but it wasn't over. Derek texted me again, this time with attitude. He said I was being petty and should let people be happy. He said Margaret deserved a fresh start, and I was holding on to something that was already dead. I didn't respond. Instead, I called Bill again and said, let's turn up the heat. We filed the official court paperwork. The petition was clean, airtight, and unshakable. I wasn't making noise. I was making moves. Margaret didn't see it coming, and neither did her boy toy. Bill told me to stay quiet and let the court system speak for me. But when I drove past the house that used to be mine and saw Derek's red Mustang parked in my driveway, I had to take a moment to breathe. I wasn't there to start a scene. I was there to collect the last of my things, like Derek's casual text had suggested. Except I didn't knock. I used my key. The one Margaret forgot I still had because she never bothered to change the locks. I opened the door and walked into my own living room. The couch was the same, but everything else felt wrong. The walls were now painted some trendy gray that looked like a bachelor pad. My family photos were gone, replaced by motivational fitness posters and pictures of Margaret and Derek flexing at the gym. I stepped into the kitchen. He'd rearranged everything. My coffee setup was gone. The counter where I used to read the morning paper now held protein powder containers and workout supplements. I could feel something tightening in my chest. Not sadness, but a fire building in my gut. Derek came downstairs in gym shorts and a tank top, probably heading out for a run. He stopped cold when he saw me. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "I came to get my things," I said, holding up the text he'd sent me. "You're supposed to let us know when you're coming," he said. "We have boundaries now." I walked past him, calm and slow. "Well, son, as long as my name's still on this house, I'll come and go as I please." His face flushed. "Margaret's going to hear about this." "Good," I said. She should have been the one to greet me. I packed quietly. A few boxes, some tools from the garage, my father's watch. I didn't need to take much. I'd already decided I'd never live in this house again. Not because I couldn't, but because I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of thinking they'd pushed me out. Derek followed me around like a watchdog, arms crossed, jaw clenched. He muttered under his breath something about old guys who can't let go. I stopped cold. "Excuse me." He straightened up like he was about to square off. "You couldn't keep your wife interested, so now you're playing legal games. You're jealous because she wanted someone who could keep up with her." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even flinch. I just said, "Son, keeping up doesn't last. And I'm not playing games. I'm just claiming what's mine." Then I left. That night, Bill called to say the paperwork had gone through. The court had accepted the petition action. Margaret and Derek were being officially notified the next morning. "Do you want to deliver it yourself?" he asked. "No," I said. "Let the system handle it." The next day, Margaret called me 6 times. I didn't pick up. She left 2 voicemails. The first one was angry. "Harold, what are you doing? This is insane. You're forcing us to sell the house after everything we've been through." The second one was different, softer, like the woman I once knew. Harold, please call me back. We can work this out. You don't need this kind of stress at your age. I laughed out loud. At my age. Like being 68 meant I should just roll over and die quietly. I didn't call back. On the third day, she showed up at my apartment. I was living in a one-bedroom place near downtown, nothing fancy but clean and quiet. She knocked like she still had the right to demand my attention. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. She looked older somehow, not just the months that had passed, but worn down, like stress had aged her faster than time. Harold, we need to talk. So talk. Why are you doing this? You know we can't afford to buy you out right now. Then maybe you should have thought about that before you moved him in. Her tone changed, became pleading. Harold, you don't need this kind of conflict. We're both too old for this. No, I said, you're too old to be acting like a teenager. But you brought this on yourself. Then I closed the door. 2 days later, Derek showed up. Not Margaret. Derek. He was trying to be diplomatic, probably Margaret's idea. Look, Harold, I get it. You're hurt. But this legal stuff is going to hurt everyone. Can't we work something out man to man? I stared at him through the screen door. Man to man? You moved into my house before my divorce was final and you want to talk man to man? He shifted uncomfortably. Margaret and we're in love. That's got to count for something. Love doesn't steal, I said. Love doesn't lie. And love damn sure doesn't send casual texts asking me to collect my belongings like I'm some stranger. I closed the door on him too. From that point forward, I didn't say a word to either of them. I let Bill do the talking and the paperwork do the cutting. Margaret and Derek hired a lawyer, tried to challenge the partition. It didn't work. The judge looked at the deed, the mortgage records, and said the magic words, Mr. Foster remains a legal co-owner. Unless the parties agree to a private buyout, the property must be sold. Bill smiled at me in court. I didn't smile back. I was still watching, still waiting. Justice wasn't complete yet. They still had keys. They still had my kitchen. They still had heat and electricity. But now they also had a deadline. 60 days to either buy me out or get out. And I already knew they couldn't do either. Derek wasn't making the kind of money that could buy out a $400,000 house. Margaret's pension was comfortable but not liquid. And now they had legal fees on top of mortgage payments they couldn't afford long-term. I drove past the house one morning and saw a "For Sale by Owner" sign on the lawn. They were trying to handle it themselves, avoid agent fees, maybe rush a sale. But the market was tough, and karma doesn't play favorites. I sat down at my kitchen table in my small but peaceful apartment and made myself a cup of coffee. Not for them, for me. Because this wasn't about destruction. It was about restoration. And they were about to find out what it feels like to be erased from something you thought you owned. Margaret started posting vague quotes on Facebook. Some people don't know when to let go. Bitterness will destroy your golden years. The posts were passive-aggressive, full of workout selfies with Derek and filtered smiles, but I wasn't looking for pity or validation. This wasn't about social media drama. This was legal. By week 3, the "For Sale by Owner" sign was gone, replaced with a professional realtor's placard. I recognized the name of the agent. Bill had made a few calls. We weren't letting them sell cheap. If they were going to sell the house, it had to be at fair market value. No shady under-the-table transfers. No backdoor deals to Derek's gym buddy or Margaret's nursing school friend. This was a clean split, which meant they had to work with us. Margaret texted me again. This time it wasn't angry. "Harold, we need to talk about the staging." I didn't respond. She tried again, "Can you please not remove everything? Derek's really stressed about this whole situation. I almost replied. Derek wasn't stressed when he was flexing in my garage and texting me about collecting my belongings. But I took a breath and forwarded it to Bill. He handled everything with the realtor. I didn't need to step foot in that house again, and that was by design. Let them feel the walls closing in. Let them walk past the bedroom I'd slept in for 35 years and wonder what else they didn't know about the man they'd underestimated. By the time showing started, they were already unraveling. Margaret called the listing agent in tears, asking if they could delay visits until they found a new place. The agent politely reminded her this was a court-ordered sale, not a choice, a requirement. They had to keep the place spotless, ready for strangers to walk through and judge their countertops. I heard through Sarah that Margaret was sleeping in the guest room some nights. That she and Derek were fighting constantly. That she'd told him, "This is what happens when you mess with a man who has nothing left to lose." I wasn't a man with nothing left to lose. I was a man who'd finally decided what he was willing to lose. They didn't just underestimate me. They'd misunderstood me entirely. I wasn't the kind of man to yell or throw punches. I was the kind of man who signed documents with a steady hand and waited for the storm I'd planted to bloom. At week 5, an offer came in. Full asking price, no contingencies. The buyer was a young Hispanic couple expecting their second child. They fell in love with the house immediately, especially the garden I'd maintained for decades. Bill told me before he told anyone else. They wanted a fast close, 2 weeks. I said, perfect. Margaret called me 4 times that day. I didn't answer. I was at the barbershop getting a trim, taking my time. Later that evening, I checked my voicemail. First message, Harold, come on. This is bigger than just us. You don't want to do this to your own family. Second message, you're really going to let strangers walk into our home and erase everything we built? Third message, I know we ended badly, but this is vindictive. You're not leaving us with anything. It was the first time she'd said, us, about her and Derek, as if their betrayal had matured into something legitimate. I suppose that was her way of saying Derek was in this with her now. For better or worse. Unfortunately for them, worse was what I had left. The day of the final walkthrough, Margaret and Derek had to be out of the house for 4 hours. I know this because Bill told me they'd requested a brief extension to clean up. The buyers had already scheduled movers. There was no more time left. When they left that house for the last time, they weren't owners. They were trespassers with keys that no longer worked. Me. I was $385,000 richer. Margaret finally broke her silence in person. She showed up at my apartment building, waited in the lobby until I came back from grocery shopping, and confronted me like she still had the right. I was carrying 2 bags of groceries when I saw her sitting in one of the lobby chairs. She looked smaller somehow, not thinner, just diminished, like gravity had finally caught up with her lies. I came to ask you something, she said, standing up. I shifted the grocery bags. What? Can you help us with the deposit on our new place? We're short about $3,000. I stared at her. Excuse me. She raised her hands defensively. I know how it sounds, but we had no idea you'd go this far. We thought. You thought I'd stay quiet, I finished for her. She nodded. You've never been the vindictive type. I'm not vindictive, I said. I'm methodical. There's a difference. She shifted awkwardly. Derek's staying with his brother. I'm at a hotel near the hospital. I didn't think it would end like this. You ended it, I reminded her. You made your choices. You moved him into my house before our divorce was even final. She had the nerve to look hurt. We were in love. Love doesn't steal. Love doesn't lie. And love damn sure doesn't send casual texts asking me to schedule pickups like I was some old furniture. Her eyes dropped to the floor. I adjusted my grip on the grocery bags. You didn't just replace me, Margaret. You erased me. So I did the same. She stood there for a moment, then nodded slowly. No argument, no outburst, just quiet understanding. The kind of silence that follows true defeat. When she walked away, I didn't watch her go. I got in the elevator and went upstairs to my apartment. I put away my groceries methodically, made myself a sandwich, and sat down to eat in peace. For the first time in months, I wasn't angry. I was just done. A week after the sale closed, the house I'd helped build became someone else's fresh start. I didn't cry. I didn't even drive by to look. Bill offered to take me out to celebrate, and we did. Over steak and beer at the place where we used to watch football games. He raised his glass and said, "You did what most people only dream of doing. You made them feel what they made you feel, powerless." I nodded, but inside it wasn't just about revenge. It was about restoration, dignity, closure. And if I'm being honest, maybe just a little bit of satisfaction too. Margaret and Derek had officially vacated the property 2 days before closing. The real estate agent told Bill they'd left it clean but cold, like a hotel room after checkout. I could picture it. Margaret probably walking through each room one last time, Derek loading his gym equipment into a U-Haul truck. They thought I was bitter, but I wasn't the one who'd crossed the line first. They did that when they moved him into my home like I'd never existed. Sarah called me the next evening. "Dad," she said hesitantly, "Mom's not doing great." I stayed silent. "She's staying at an extended stay hotel. She said something about her credit being affected. And Derek, they're not together anymore." "Good," I said plainly. He used her to get a free place to live, and she used him to feel young again. Neither of those things last. Sarah sighed. "I don't want to take sides." "You already did," I said gently. "When you stayed quiet while they treated me like I was already dead." She didn't respond to that. Just whispered, "I'm sorry." I didn't need her to grovel. I just needed her to understand the depth of what had happened. Not just to me, but to the idea of marriage, loyalty, respect. The things that used to matter. Later that week, I got an email from Margaret. It started with the usual fake politeness, "Harold, I know we've had our differences." She went on to say they were looking for a new place but having a hard time qualifying for a mortgage. She asked if I'd be willing to loan them part of the money from the house sale to help them get back on their feet. She even had the gall to write, "After all, it's not like you need all of it at your age." At my age. Again. I stared at the screen for a long time, then hit delete. No reply, no engagement, no reaction. That silence would be louder than anything I could say. Bill told me Margaret would likely end up in a rental. A significant downgrade, he added, which is poetic, because they treated you like a downgrade. I spent the next few weeks in something close to peace. I picked up a part-time job at the hardware store, something to keep my mind active and my hands busy. The work was honest, straightforward, and surrounded by tools and problems that had clear solutions. It felt fitting. I had my own small place now, nothing fancy, but it was mine. Fully mine. No shared deed. No waiting for approval. No second toothbrush in the bathroom. Just space, solitude, and the slow process of healing. One afternoon, while helping a customer find the right screws for his deck project, a man about my age approached me. He'd heard about what happened through the local gossip network. "Harold," he said quietly, "I heard what went down with Margaret. I just want to say, you handled that with class." I thanked him, but he leaned in and added, "and precision." That part stayed with me. Precision. I'd never thought of myself that way before, but I suppose it takes a certain kind of focus to lose everything and rebuild something better in its place. Quietly, methodically, without begging for permission or validation. A few days later, I saw Margaret again. Not by choice. I was at the post office when I noticed a woman sitting in her car in the parking lot, engine running but not moving. It took me a second to realize it was her. She saw me and got out of her car quickly. "Harold." "Hi." I nodded but kept walking toward the building. She followed me. "I'm not trying to fight," she said. "I just wanted to talk." I paused at the door. "Talk about what, Margaret?" She shifted nervously. I didn't think you had it in you." I raised an eyebrow. "The court stuff, the house, everything." I leaned against the door frame, arms crossed. "You thought I was too old to fight back." She rubbed her temples. "No, I thought you'd be too tired." That hit deeper than I expected because she was right about one thing. I had been tired. Tired of being taken for granted. Tired of being the stable, predictable one while everyone else got to be exciting. But then I realized tired isn't the same as finished. "Well," I said softly, "I guess you miscalculated." She laughed, but it was bitter and sad. "Derek left me." I blinked. "Already?" He said I embarrassed him. That he'd given up his freedom for a woman who couldn't even keep a roof over his head. "And he's wrong?" I asked. She didn't answer. I stared at her for a moment, then reached for the door handle. "Good luck, Margaret." She reached out like she wanted to say more, but I was already walking into the post office. I didn't owe her another conversation. Not anymore. When I got home that evening, I opened the folder Bill had given me weeks ago. It contained all the paperwork from the sale, the deed transfer, the final payout statement, and something extra, a handwritten note from Bill that said, "You didn't just cash out, Harold. You cashed in on your dignity." I folded the note and put it in my desk drawer. Then I made myself a bourbon and water, turned on the evening news, and settled into my recliner. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something or mourning something or holding on to something. I was just living. And the quiet around me wasn't loneliness anymore. It was freedom. About 2 months after I saw Margaret at the post office, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately, neat, feminine cursive that I'd seen on grocery lists and birthday cards for 35 years. I opened the envelope with steady hands, already knowing it wouldn't be an apology. And I was right. Margaret wasn't the apologizing type. It was a guilt trip on paper, a plea dressed up in self-pity. One of those, "You won, but look what you've done," letters. She said I'd ruined 2 lives and destroyed a future, like I hadn't simply taken back what was already mine. Near the bottom, she wrote, "I hope it was worth it." I folded the letter neatly and put it in my desk drawer next to Bill's note. I didn't tear it up. I didn't burn it. I didn't even curse under my breath. Because it was worth it. Every signature on every document, every sleepless night wondering if I was doing the right thing, every moment of silence when I could have argued back. Later that week, Sarah invited me to dinner. She'd been trying to reconnect more lately, and I could tell the fog had lifted for her. Maybe she was starting to see Margaret and Derek without the romantic polish. I didn't hold her initial silence against her anymore. Not because it didn't hurt, but because holding on to it would only weigh me down longer. We met at a family restaurant near her house, nothing fancy but comfortable enough that we could talk without shouting over music. She looked like the little girl I used to push on swings, only now with a woman's face and guilt in her eyes. After we ordered, she fidgeted with her napkin. "I want to say something," she said. "What's that?" "Thank you for not letting her get away with it." I stared at her, not because I was surprised, but because it felt so long overdue. "I didn't know how to stop her," she admitted. "But you did. You didn't just lose a wife, Dad. You lost your dignity in that marriage. And then you turned around and took it back on your own terms." I wanted to tear up, but I didn't. I just took a deep breath and said, "I didn't do it to punish her, honey. I did it so I could breathe again. So the next man like me doesn't feel like he has to disappear just because someone says he's too old to matter. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You can move closer to us if you want, she said. The grandkids ask about you all the time. We'll help you find a place. I smiled but shook my head. I've already found something better, I said. Peace. The next month, I found myself walking into a men's group at the community center. Bill had suggested it without asking, typical Bill. Just talk about your experience, he said. You'd be surprised how many guys need to hear it. I didn't want to at first. I wasn't some motivational speaker. I was just a man who'd survived betrayal and humiliation. But when I looked around that room at the tired eyes, the slumped shoulders, the bitter smiles, I saw myself. Not the current version sitting there with clear paperwork and peace of mind. I saw the Harold who used to eat dinner alone while his wife was working late. The Harold who used to think staying quiet was the same as staying strong. So I stood up and told them everything. Not just about Margaret or Derek or the lawsuit. I told them about the nights I spent watching TV alone in the house I'd paid for. About the way people looked at me like I was the old husband who couldn't satisfy his wife. About the way silence can become its own prison when nobody listens anymore. And then I told them how I got free. Not through anger. Not through begging. Not through violence or drama. But through understanding the power of patience, the strength of strategy, and the value of a signature on the right piece of paper. When I finished, one man shook my hand with tears in his eyes and said, "You reminded me that it's not over. It's never over until we say it's over." That night, I went home and pulled out a fresh notebook. Not the one I'd used to write angry letters to myself during the divorce, but a brand new one, unmarked. And on the first page, I wrote, "This is not a second chapter. This is a whole new book." The next morning, Bill called with an update. The young couple who'd bought my old house had settled in completely. They'd turned my workshop into a playroom for their kids and planted new flowers in the garden I'd started. They said it finally feels like a family home, he told me. That made me smile. That house deserved laughter again. It deserved warmth that wasn't forced or fake. As for Margaret, last I heard she was renting a small apartment across town, working per diem shifts at the hospital to make ends meet. Derek had moved back to his home state, probably telling people he used to live in a big house with an older woman. I don't really care about their details anymore, because the day they decided I was expendable, when they moved him into my home and treated me like yesterday's news, they handed me the match. All I did was strike it. Now I sit in a kitchen that's entirely mine. There's no echo of anyone else's voice, no compromise about what to watch on TV, no walking on eggshells around someone else's mood. Just me, my coffee, and the steady hum of a life I built from the ground up. The coffee mug I'm holding says, "Earned every drop." It was a gift from Bill, and it makes me chuckle every time I use it. I don't think about what I lost anymore. I think about what I reclaimed, my dignity, my voice, my damn name on a deed. And the best part? I did it all without ever raising my voice or throwing a punch. Because silence isn't surrender. Sometimes it's strategy. And sometimes it's the sound of a man who's finally done being underestimated. Some people think the story ends once you've won the court case, collected the check, and watched the people who disrespected you pack their belongings and disappear. They think that's the finish line. Justice served, dignity restored, curtain closed. But life keeps going. And sometimes the most important part of your story begins after everyone assumes you've faded away. That was me. After Margaret and Derek vanished from my life, one to a cramped apartment, the other to whatever rock he crawled back under, I didn't throw a party. I didn't strut around like some conquering hero. I simply exhaled. It was the kind of breath you don't realize you've been holding until your chest aches from relief. I took that money from the house sale, over $385,000 after fees and taxes, and I didn't splurge. I didn't buy a motorcycle or book a cruise to Alaska. I sat down with Bill and did what every man who's been written off should do. I made a plan. We met with a financial advisor, a sharp woman in her 50s who looked over my documents and said, "Let's make sure this money outlives the betrayal." I smiled. That's exactly what I wanted. I invested most of it conservatively. Bought a small but comfortable condo in my name only. No co-signers, no shared anything. Everything from the thermostat to the mailbox key belonged to me. Then I disappeared. Not dramatically, not in some witness protection sense. I mean socially, digitally, emotionally. I deleted my Facebook account. Stopped attending the same church where whispers followed me like smoke. I let people wonder where I'd gone, let them guess whether I'd lost my mind or just moved on. I moved on. All right. 3 states away, to a quiet town in Montana where the mountains remind you every day that your problems are smaller than you think. Out here, people know me as Harold, the guy who volunteers at the food bank, who fixes small engines for neighbors, who grows tomatoes that win ribbons at the county fair. No one here knows that I once cried myself to sleep in a house that was legally mine but emotionally stolen. No one knows that my silence once fed someone else's ego. And I like it that way. Every now and then, I get calls from old acquaintances. People who used to pity me now suddenly want to check in. Sometimes it's men going through similar situations, asking for advice. Sometimes it's gossip disguised as concern. And once, it was Margaret. She called last Christmas. I saw her name on the caller ID and let it go to voicemail. She said she was sorry, that she missed our friendship, that she hoped I was doing well. I deleted the message without listening to it completely. Because sometimes silence is the final answer. The kind of silence that closes doors permanently. But I didn't stop there. One morning, sitting on my porch watching the sunrise over the mountains, I realized I wasn't done building. Not just a new life, but something bigger, something lasting. So I took $25,000 from the sale money and donated it anonymously to a legal aid clinic that helps senior citizens navigate divorce and financial abuse. No plaque, no recognition, just a wire transfer and a note that said, "For the men who don't yet know they're allowed to fight back." The clinic director later wrote in their newsletter that the donation helped 12 men escape manipulative marriages and secure fair settlements. 2 of them used the legal help to uncover hidden assets their wives had been hiding. That's what real legacy looks like. Not just surviving the storm, but building a lighthouse for the men still lost at sea. I don't tell people my whole story. They don't know the details about the pink stationery or the court hearing or how Margaret looked when she realized I wasn't bluffing. But sometimes I sit at my kitchen table, morning light streaming through clean windows, a fresh cup of coffee in hand, and I write it all down. Not for them. For me. To remind myself of who I was when I walked through fire and came out stronger. You see, Margaret didn't just lose a husband. She lost access to my stability, my loyalty, my silence. Derek didn't just lose a free place to live. He lost the illusion that he could build his future on someone else's foundation and not get burned. They both learned a lesson most people never see coming: never assume the quiet ones are weak. Never assume the polite ones don't know how to destroy you legally. Never assume the man you wronged has nothing left to lose. Because sometimes he's just waiting for the right moment. And when that moment comes, he won't yell. He won't beg. He won't even look back. He'll cash out. And you'll be left homeless, not just without a roof, but without peace. So now when I sip from my coffee mug that says, "Earned every drop," I do it slowly, because I've earned every ounce of this peace. And I want it to last a lifetime. My name is Harold Foster. I was divorced, discarded, and disrespected. And then I reminded them, legally, financially, spiritually, who they were dealing with. They bet against the wrong man. And now I sleep well, I laugh often, and I never answer unknown numbers. That's not revenge. That's recovery. The mountains here in Montana don't care about my story. They don't judge the choices I made or the battles I fought. They just stand there, solid and permanent, reminding me every day that some things endure while others crumble. I've been here 18 months now, and I've built something Margaret and Derek could never touch, a life based on truth instead of illusion, on substance instead of appearance, on dignity instead of desperation. Every morning I wake up in a bed I chose, in a room I painted, in a house where every decision is mine alone. I make my coffee exactly as strong as I like it. I read the paper without anyone commenting on the articles. I plan my day without checking with anyone else. This isn't the lonely existence people warned me about when I filed those papers. This is freedom. Last week, I got a letter from Sarah. She's planning to visit this summer with the grandkids. She wants them to see the mountains, but more than that, she wants them to see their grandfather, not as the man who got divorced, but as the man who rebuilt his life on his own terms. Dad, she wrote, I used to worry that you'd become bitter after everything that happened. Instead, you became something I didn't expect, completely yourself. I read that line 3 times before folding the letter and putting it in my desk drawer next to all the other important documents, the deed to my condo, the investment statements, Bill's congratulatory note, and yes, even Margaret's final letter. Not because I want to remember the pain, but because I want to remember the transformation. The man who signed those divorce papers was not the same man who signed the deed to this mountain home. One was a victim of someone else's choices. The other was the author of his own comeback. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I just walked away quietly like they expected. If I'd packed my things, found a small apartment, and spent my golden years nursing wounded pride and bitter memories. I would have survived, probably. But I wouldn't have thrived. I wouldn't have discovered that a man can be 68 years old and still surprise himself with his own strength. I wouldn't have learned that silence can be more powerful than shouting, that patience can be more devastating than rage. Most importantly, I wouldn't have discovered that revenge and recovery can be the same thing when you do it right. The young couple who bought my old house sent me a Christmas card last year. They'd gotten my address somehow, probably through Bill, and wanted to thank me for taking such good care of the property. They included a photo of their children playing in the backyard where I used to grow vegetables. I smiled when I saw it. That house was meant for families, for laughter, for people who understood the difference between a home and just a place to live. Margaret and Derek never understood that difference. To them, it was just a convenient address, a status symbol, a place to play house until reality came knocking. But reality always comes knocking. And when it knocked on their door, it came in the form of legal documents with my name on them. I keep the Christmas card on my refrigerator, not out of nostalgia for the house, but as a reminder that endings can become beginnings when you have the courage to write your own story. Tonight, I'll sit on my porch like I do most evenings, watching the sun set behind the mountains, listening to the quiet that used to scare me but now comforts me. I'll think about the path that brought me here, the betrayal that felt like destruction but became reconstruction. And I'll remember that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting better. Sometimes it's getting free. Sometimes it's getting to be exactly who you were meant to be before someone else tried to convince you that you were too old, too set in your ways, too ordinary to matter. I am Harold Foster. I am 70 years old. I own my home, my peace, and my story. And I'm just getting started.